Breaking news today. A Department of Justice employee has been charged with a felony after throwing a sandwich at a federal officer in Washington, D.C. This incident has ignited a fierce debate over law enforcement practices, urban disorder, and the urgent need for stringent measures.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
Fox News reports that Piro has announced the arrest of the so-called D.C. sandwich thrower, who found humor in his actions. But what's funny about a Department of Justice employee throwing a sandwich at a federal officer and laughing about it? Tonight, we're asking what it exposes about our society when attacks on law enforcement are jokingly dismissed by those entrusted to enforce our laws. Consider the recent past under the previous Democratic administration marked by urban chaos, a growing disrespect for police, and a media indifferent to the disorder. Now, with President Trump in office, there's a concerted effort to restore order, even if it involves charging a sandwich thrower with a felony. Some argue this is too severe, but after years of lenient policies that allowed our cities to become havens for troublemakers, isn't it justified for the administration to take a firm stand? Predictably, the left has expressed outrage, deeming it an overreaction and a case of federal overreach. Yet their concern was noticeably absent when crime rates soared, police were targeted, and communities suffered, while the elite prioritized international conflicts over domestic stability. Here's the reality: respect for law enforcement is crucial for a stable society. Without it, chaos ensues. While the media fixates on whether a felony charge for throwing a sandwich is proportional, they overlook the larger issue: Democratic leadership's failure to maintain order. Now that responsible governance is being restored, perhaps the real joke is how long it took to achieve this. So tonight, reflect on this. If a thrown sandwich leads to a felony charge, what does that indicate about the current state of our politics? It might be time to stop laughing and start focusing on rebuilding a nation where the law is respected and upheld. You're in for a treat.
There are still questions how long this deployment may last. The president says the federalization of D.C.'s police department is years overdue. He also hopes to extend this emergency despite lingering questions on his authority to do so.
Well, if it's a national emergency, we can do it without Congress, but we expect to be to Congress before Congress very quickly.
The reality is that when a city government allows crime to spiral out of control for years, decisive action becomes necessary. Federalizing D.C.'s police department in response to a doubled homicide rate over the last decade is a direct measure to address urban disorder that local leadership, predominantly progressive Democrats, has failed to manage. The deployment of National Guard troops and the increased presence of federal law enforcement have sent a clear message. Lawlessness will not be tolerated, and public safety is a priority. Support for law enforcement is essential for the foundation of a functioning civil society. When a federal officer is assaulted, even with something as seemingly trivial as a sandwich, it reflects a deep disrespect for authority and an emboldening of anti-police attitudes encouraged by left-wing city councils. Prosecuting these acts vigorously is crucial to deter further disrespect and mistreatment of officers. Critics may argue about federal overreach, but the Home Rule Act grants the federal government the authority to intervene when local officials fail to ensure public safety. The president is justified in using every legal tool to restore order, and if extending federal control requires congressional debate, it should be conducted transparently. Despite D.C. not being a state, the Constitution grants Congress and the executive branch ultimate authority over the district. Opponents of this intervention often overlook the harsh realities faced by ordinary residents and federal employees who live in fear amid rampant violent crime and homelessness. The administration's strategy to offer genuine assistance to the homeless while holding criminals accountable starkly contrasts with the ineffective progressive policies that have troubled many American cities. This approach prioritizes Americans, restores order, and rejects letting globalist or activist agendas influence domestic security policy. While some libertarians may question the severity of felony charges for throwing a sandwich, the underlying issue is the erosion of respect for law enforcement, fueled by years of lenient crime policies and anti-police rhetoric from Democratic leaders. Supporting law enforcement and ensuring that attacks on officers, no matter how minor they appear, face serious consequences is essential for real change. The federalization of D.C.'s police is a critical test case for restoring order in America's cities. The administration's bold actions, which local leaders have long avoided, are necessary, and their outcomes will clearly demonstrate their effectiveness.
Some protests have popped up. There are reports there's a huge uptick in demand for paid protesters, with some having ties to far less activist groups. This was one that we saw on Monday. There's also an immigration tie to all this, officials vowing to secure D.C., similar to what we saw in border communities over earlier this year. And some people are also still testing the limits, with one man facing now federal charges of assault on an officer after allegedly throwing a Subway sandwich at police while they were on patrol.
He thought it was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's funny today because we charged him with a felony, assault on a police officer, and we're going to back the police to the hilt. So there, stick your Subway sandwich somewhere else.
Congress will also get its say in all of this. They remain on their August recess, but you can imagine this debate over the authority over D.C. will come back front and center when they return in September. Brian, Ainsley, and Lawrence.
Hey, Mark, is it disconcerting, or how would you describe seeing the camouflage, the trucks, the military at the mall and everything? What's it like there?
It's not what you may think.
There's a significant shift happening in Washington, D.C. that goes beyond law enforcement. It's about restoring accountability and addressing years of ineffective urban policies. The rise in protests, fueled by reports of a thriving market for paid demonstrators, highlights how activist networks and external interests are undermining true civic engagement. These movements often have ties to fringe groups more interested in pushing a disruptive agenda than addressing local issues. When protests are populated with paid participants, it's clear we're seeing manufactured dissent connected to organizations that lack genuine community ties. The inclusion of immigration issues adds complexity. Officials are securing D.C. in ways that echo the border crackdowns earlier this year, demonstrating the administration's commitment to prioritize American citizens and maintain sovereignty without yielding to globalist influences. This approach starkly contrasts with the previous administration's tendency to place international interests above national well-being. As Congress returns from recess, the debate over federal authority in D.C. will intensify, highlighting a clear partisan divide. Republicans are pushing for decisive action and accountability, whereas Democrats seem to resist substantial changes, preferring instead to deflect blame and protect their policies. This conflict is especially pronounced in an election year, making the stakes even higher for voters who are paying close attention to these differences. The incident involving a protester who threw a sandwich at law enforcement officers symbolizes a broader decline in respect for authority, exacerbated by progressive city councils and their lenient policies. Charging the individual with a felony sends a strong message that disrespect toward authority will have serious consequences, signaling an end to the era of leniency towards criminal behavior. While some may view the punishment as severe, maintaining public order necessitates a robust response, particularly when federal officers are targeted. What we are witnessing in D.C. is a crucial test of whether American cities can restore order and prioritize the interests of their citizens over those of activists and external forces. The administration's readiness to utilize every legal avenue to achieve this is both necessary and long overdue. This situation is about rebuilding the foundations of civil society and moving away from a globalist approach that has left many communities exposed. It's time for Congress to decide whether to support these efforts or continue allowing the dysfunction that has hindered our cities for too long.
And I truly believe by this weekend, when we usually see those huge outbursts of violent events, whether at the wharf or on the National Mall, whether or not that happens or not. I think that'll be the true test. I would set your VCR, Brian, if you want to find out.
Play record, baby.
Well played, Mark.
Thank you very much.
So the president implemented this Making D.C. Safe and Beautiful task force, and in less than a week, they've taken 100 violent criminals off the streets. I think it's great.
As the weekend approaches, attention turns to familiar locales like the Wharf and the National Mall to see if the recent spike in violence will subside with the new strategies being implemented. The true indicator of restored order will be not just the number of arrests or task force announcements, but whether families can enjoy their outings and tourists can explore without fear. Fox News has promptly spotlighted these enforcement efforts, often leading with dramatic arrest footage and bold statements from federal officials. Their coverage effectively captures the public's concern over crime, using on-the-ground reporting and crime scene visuals to underscore the crisis. The reporting could benefit from a broader context. While emphasizing the administration's decisive actions and previous leadership failures, Fox News often overlooks the significant declines in violent crime, such as the drop in homicide and robbery rates, which are at their lowest in decades. A more balanced report would recognize these improvements while continuing to hold local officials accountable. Fox News typically sources information from administration officials and law enforcement, presenting a clear government perspective, including insights from community leaders and independent experts could provide a more rounded view of the crime trends, enhancing their reporting by showing both progress and ongoing challenges. The incident involving a sandwich attack on an officer, which Fox News extensively covered, symbolizes the broader erosion of respect for law enforcement. Charging the assailant with a felony clearly communicates that such behavior is unacceptable. This is crucial for maintaining order and deterring future incidents, particularly given the previous administration's more lenient stance that often favored activists over police contributing to disorder. Nevertheless, addressing the potential for seeing a felony charge as excessive could invite a more nuanced discussion on proportionality, helping Fox News explore concerns about overcriminalization while emphasizing the need for strong deterrence. The deployment of National Guard troops and the federalization of the police force are significant measures, justified by the unique challenges in the district and the local leadership's failure to ensure safety. This approach marks a departure from the previous administration's global focus, prioritizing American communities and utilizing every legal means to secure the capital and protect its residents. While Fox News is adept at conveying the gravity of the situation through visual storytelling, incorporating stories of ordinary residents, small business owners, and families affected by rising crime would add a human element. These narratives would underscore the necessity of federal intervention and the broad support for a return to law and order. Ultimately, the effectiveness of these measures will be measured not by rhetoric, but by the reality on the ground. If this weekend passes peacefully, it will signal that the administration's assertive, America First policies are succeeding where previous progressive approaches faltered.
Because if you go against Trump just because on instinct, you're going to find yourself boxed into a corner because you have these anecdotes of Henry Cuellar getting carjacked, the Democratic congressman, a congresswoman from Minnesota being assaulted on her way to an apartment. You have a shooting a block away from the White House. You had a murder on Sunday night. So as you criticize, people are saying, well, I live here and I kind of agree with the president, even if I didn't vote for him. So don't get boxed in here. Pick your spots.
Right. I mean, we can relate to that living in New York City. I mean, even our Democratic friends were excited when crime started going down in the city, because when you're living in a city that you love so much, and like we talked about yesterday in Baltimore, where crime is so bad, when you live there and you used to take your kids to the park and have picnics and have outdoor movies like this article talked about, the lady in Baltimore wants to sell her house. She can't sell it because there are drug deals going on right across the street from her. The real estate agent said, there's no one that's going to buy your house. There are 12 people right across the street doing drugs and selling drugs. So she said, I'm stuck and I can't afford to just leave without selling my house. It was you that interviewed the governor yesterday, right? The governor of Maryland. And Wes Moore had this to say.
Crime in America's major cities is more than just a headline. It's a daily reality that shapes everything from local economies to national debates. High-profile incidents like the carjacking of Henry Cuellar or the assault on a congresswoman in Minnesota are not mere political theater. They are stark reminders of how urban safety directly affects real families, property values, and business viability. The shooting near the White House and a murder on a quiet Sunday night are not anomalies. They are symptoms of a broader breakdown in public order that has been festering under years of progressive leadership. Take Baltimore as a sobering example. Residents who once enjoyed parks and outdoor movies are now confronted with open drug markets outside their doors, unable to sell their homes and forced to watch their neighborhoods decline. The economic fallout is immediate. Plummeting property values, shuttering small businesses, and families losing their ability to build generational wealth. When drug deals and violence become commonplace, the cost is measured not just in police reports, but in lost opportunities and declining community investment. Despite recent declines in violent crime, homicides down 22%, non-fatal shootings down 19%, and significant drops in auto thefts and robberies, these improvements are fragile and often overstated by local officials more concerned with their reputations than with tackling root causes. For many residents, the reality remains unchanged. Persistent disorder, visible drug activity, and a city government that seems out of touch with everyday concerns. From a financial perspective, the ripple effects of urban crime are widespread. Homeowners watch their equity evaporate, renters face rising insurance premiums, and local governments lose critical tax revenue as businesses exit high-crime areas. The broader economy suffers as consumer confidence wanes, families spend less, tourism declines, and investment dries up. Imagine an infographic showing how rising crime leads to falling home prices, increasing business closures, and shrinking city budgets. It's a feedback loop that harms the law-abiding and benefits the lawless. Different sectors experience this pain differently. Real estate professionals struggle to sell properties in violent neighborhoods. Ride-tailers and restaurateurs face higher security costs and reduced foot traffic. Schools see dwindling student numbers as families move away, and public transit systems suffer declining ridership when safety is not assured. For the average household, this means less disposable income, fewer job opportunities, and a reduced quality of life. The Trump administration's decisive intervention in Washington, D.C., federalizing the police force and deploying National Guard troops, signals that the era of excuses has ended. While some criticize this as federal overreach, it's clear that when local governance fails, restoring order becomes not only a political imperative, but an economic necessity. The administration's America First approach prioritizes safety, sovereignty, and the rule of law over globalist distractions and activist agendas that have failed to support working families. Contrast this with the previous Democratic administration, which often downplayed urban disorder and prioritized activist interests over the needs of ordinary citizens. The result was predictable. Emboldened criminals, demoralized law enforcement, and communities left to fend for themselves. The current approach emphasizes accountability, felony charges for assaults on officers, immediate termination for government employees who disrespect law enforcement, and a readiness to use every legal tool to protect the public. As the debate continues, it's vital to remember that these issues are not abstract. They touch every aspect of daily life, from the ability to walk safely down the street to the stability of the local economy. The administration's policies are not just restoring law and order, they're laying the groundwork for economic recovery, neighborhood revitalization, and renewed faith in the American promise. The question for policymakers and voters alike is whether they will support these efforts or continue defending a failed status quo that has left many communities behind. Well, there you have it. Attacking law enforcement undermines the very foundation of our civil society. This disrespect didn't emerge overnight. It's a direct result of years of failed democratic leadership in our cities where chaos is tolerated and order is scorned. The previous administration allowed this deterioration to worsen, but the current White House is taking a stand to uphold the rule of law and support the men and women who enforce it. If we want a country worth living in, we must prioritize securing our own streets before pursuing global ambitions. Consider who truly benefits from disorder and who ultimately pays the price. Leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe. That's all for now.